happened in the last 10 years or so in tax? I think it's quite an important and very evolving area, because about 10 years ago the regime was so much easier and there was very little obligation on people to report things. Whereas now we have a new rule called the General Anti-Abuse Rule, which basically means now that you have to consider, whenever you do any sort of tax planning, whether or not you might fall foul of that rule. And if so, you have to report it to the revenue in advance, or you take your chance, and in which case, if you have fallen foul of the rule, there are penalties and difficulties associated with that. So our clients are really having to think very carefully about this nowadays, because in the past, we could advise them what to do, and then they would consider if they were prepared to take those risks and then press on with their tax planning schemes, whereas in this day and age, they have to consider the impact of this GAR, the General Anti-Abuse Rule. And also there's a new regime called the Disclosure of Tax Avoidance Schemes, which is another mechanism whereby the revenue expect you to disclose in your tax return if you have entered into a certain type of arrangement, so they get the chance effectively to validate it and whether or not they view it as being anti-abusive or not. Some of this tax planning is perfectly legitimate, but due to various public pressures, and then, for example, take the MP's expensive scandal, quite a lot of the opportunities that are used, if the press find out about them, they can get terribly excited. And our clients, a lot of them being terribly private, if it was found out that some rich landowner who lives in a big grand house in the countryside somewhere is suddenly taking advantage of a completely legitimate opportunity, the press say, well, hang on, he's rich enough, how come he can be able to save even more money? So I think that's one of the reasons why tax planning nowadays we have to be so careful about, and it's very important to keep your advice up to date all the time to make sure you're not falling foul of what should be legitimate but can actually slightly fall over the line of public acceptability.